Now, it is my pleasure to introduce one of our sponsors today. And I am going to welcome Andrea Yeiser to the stage in just a moment. She is the Vice President of Engineering and Services, Network and Information Solutions Division, Mission Systems Sector at Northrop Grumman, and she will introduce our panel moderator. I do want to remind everyone for the panels, we will be taking question cards, so feel free to pass those along to our graduate student interns who are all looking for jobs in the intelligence community. And feel free to use your name and organization either when you're writing down your questions on cards or if you are going to ask questions during our keynotes. It's not required, but it sometimes adds a little valued context. So thanks so much.
Thank you, Suzanne. And good morning, everyone. It is quite an honor to be here in this room, and as I look out over the audience, it is awe-inspiring. I encourage you all to just take a look around at this room. It is not often that we see a room with the composition in this room. It's a wonderfully diverse audience here, and that just sings to my heart. On behalf of Northrop Grumman, we are indeed a very proud sponsor of today's program. For many years, we've also been a proud sponsor of INSA and the work that they do to advance collaborative approaches to the intelligence and national security priorities. At Northrop, we truly believe that at the core of our competitive advantage is that we challenge ourselves to hire people from many, many diverse backgrounds, personal passions, disciplines, and we share the drive to push the boundaries of advancement through science, technology, and engineering. I will add that creating a diverse, equity, and inclusive workforce is, as you've heard, hard work. It takes extreme intentionality. It's not something that just happens. It's not something that you just say, hey, I want to hire a diverse workforce. It really takes a strong intentionality in order to truly accomplish it. I'm quite proud of how Northrop has done that over a series of many, many years. I am excited to be here today, as well as several of my colleagues who are also here in the audience. It is also now my pleasure to introduce the moderator of our panel, Non-Traditional Ways the IC Leverages Diverse Talent Pools. I'm really excited to hear this particular panel and really looking forward to it. So with that, let me introduce Ms. Nicole Gibson. She is a partner for the national security sector at Guidehouse, where she specializes in strategic planning, business process improvement, and customer relationship management. She previously served on the INSA's board of directors and is currently the chair of the Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Council. And then let me just add a little tidbit, because I think diversity and inclusion obviously includes people with different backgrounds, with different passions, with different vantage points. It also includes finding those connections that we can make that bind us together, that give us that opening to create a closer connection. So let me just highlight a few tidbits. And when I heard some of them, there was that instant connection for me for some of these. One, born and raised in the DC area, not me, but many of you may be born and raised in the DC area. As we've heard before, many of us are parents. She's the mother of 2 teenage boys. I know what she's going through. My sons are a little older than that now, and fortunately on their own, but I've been there. 20 plus years in the Intel community. I'm sure many of you can instantly relate to that. And an avid runner, which I can certainly relate to. We had a good conversation about how running can be addictive. So I encourage all of us to not just embrace the differences, but also seek out those commonalities that we all have. I can almost guarantee you can find a common theme with almost everybody. And that's always fun for me to try and seek out and do that. So with that, please join me in welcoming Nicole Gibson. Thank you.
Good morning. It's so nice to see so many old friends. I guess it's been, I can't believe it's been 2 years, but like to see Mel and other folks in the audience that I just haven't seen in person in a while. It's just such a privilege to be up here for many reasons, but to see all you guys, it's really special. Thank you for that lovely introduction. That was so kind. My name is Nicole Gibson. I'm a partner at Guidehouse, and thrilled to bring you this panel here this morning. Gina, I know you said you were nervous during your speech. You could not tell, and I hope we keep the momentum going with this panel because that was incredible. Thank you so much for those words. So let me first start by introducing these fabulous speakers that I have here on the stage today. They're going to share, Gina talked about this a little bit, how the IC is so innovative and creative, and I think these speakers have so many great stories to share and leading practices on how they've created diverse and inclusive workforces, either within their government agencies or how they're partnering with the IC to build the future workforce. So you should be really thrilled to hear what they say. So immediately to my right, we have Kiersten Todt. She's Chief of Staff of CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. She is responsible for the planning, allocation of resources, and development of long-range objectives in support of the department's goals and milestones. She provides strategic vision, guidance, and direction to ensure CISA's director is prepared to interdict or respond to threats to the homeland. Next to her, we have Mr. Peter Kant. He's the chairman and CEO of Enabled Intelligence, an artificial intelligence technology company providing accurate data labeling for U.S. defense and intelligence agencies and meaningful high-tech employment to veterans and people with differing abilities. And finally, we have Dr. Christian Vogler, a professor from Gallaudet University. He is a professor in the School of Science, Technology, Accessibility, Mathematics, and Public Health at Gallaudet, and the director of the Technology Access Program Research Group. He leads and co-leads multiple research grants providing accessible technologies for the deaf and hard of hearing. Please welcome them to the stage. All right, so I have a couple of really good questions. I'm going to start with Kiersten because she's sitting immediately next to me. So Kiersten, thank you again for joining us this morning. CISA has introduced several grants and educational programs that have targeted underserved populations and encouraged diverse pathways towards cyber careers. Can you elaborate on these programs and the impact that they've had so far?
Thanks so much. Well, thanks so much, Nicole, and thank you so much to INSA for hosting this event and for facilitating these types of conversations, which are critical. And Gina, thank you so much for your thoughtful words and for all that you've done in service both to the country, but to these important issues, because leadership on these issues has become more important now than ever. And I want to just correct something that I think is really important, which is everything that we're doing is just a step in this journey. By no way have we reached a destination. And when we talk about what we're working on, we are still so early in this process. So when we're looking at CISA, I look at CISA in 3 buckets as far as our mission. What we're doing is we're building out a workforce for ourselves that represents the world, that has a population that truly represents all of our capabilities, diversity, and other elements. We're also looking at how do we become a model for a workforce, not just for government, but truly for the nation. Secondly, we're obviously working closely with the government agencies. Our responsibility is to secure the .gov, which is it's 101 federal agencies, and then it's our work with industry. I mention all of those because it's very critical in how we're building out our workforce. And I think what is so important when we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, this is not something that we do in addition to what we're doing. We actually, one of the key elements of how we're talking about CISA is building an inclusive workforce. We each have capabilities, we each have aptitudes, we have traits that are critical to what we can all offer. And until we start to look at all of that is actually critical to the mission, we're always going to be struggling against an obstacle. And so as was said earlier, we've got to invest in this process. And oftentimes, sometimes people confuse intent with outcome, but what we need to understand is that at CISA, what we're focused on is we can only do our job effectively if we're building out an effective, diverse workforce. When we look at cybersecurity, cybersecurity is about solving problems. And in order to do that, we need to pull in multi-areas, multi-disciplines to be successful. So at CISA, what we're focused on is going to where the talent is. We can't expect everybody to go on to USA Jobs and come to us. So we're going into underserved communities. We're partnering with high schools, with vocational schools, community colleges, minority-serving institutions, HBCUs. We've got a partnership with Empower and Girls Who Code, offering them grant and funding so that they can work with us. We have a partnership with a national security agency in their National Centers of Excellence for Cybersecurity and with the National Science Foundation and their Scholarship for Service. And we're working closely on the Cybersecurity Education and Training Assistance Program, which gives grants to students who are blind or visually impaired. All of these are great starting points, but what we have to be able to do is build out that workforce that supports that. I'm particularly proud that CISA is going to be the second agency, federal agency, to have a neurodiversity pilot. And I've learned a lot through this process. I have a son who's got cerebral palsy, so I kind of came in a little bit like, hey, I know what this is. But when we're looking at this, this is so much more about what inclusivity means. And when we think about how we're solving problems, not just in cybersecurity, but across the board, we have to do a better job accessing this talent. Accenture just did a study recently that talked about the fact that if we could employ 1% of the neurodiverse individuals in this country, we would increase our gross domestic product by $25 billion. If we think through the talent and the accessible talent that we have in this nation, we in the government have a responsibility to lead. We often see government behind the eight ball when it comes to some of these processes, but we have an opportunity right now to partner with industry, to partner with our federal agencies, to use these programs to model this diverse, equitable, inclusive, accessible workforce, again, not just for government, but for the nation. I'm really looking forward to the conversation. Thank you, Nicole.
It's okay, well, figure it out. That's fascinating facts. If we all just looked at that 1% and saw what we could do with our different organizations, that's really impressive. Dr. Vogler, I wanted to throw the next question over to you. I have to say, one of the greatest things about INSA is you always learn something from these different sessions, and I did not realize until we started this panel that we had a partnership, that the IC has a partnership with Gallaudet University. So I'm honored to ask you the question about how Gallaudet is partnering with the IC agencies and how that journey began.
Sure, I'm happy to answer, and I'm honored to be here. Gallaudet University has a partnership focused on education with the NGA. And that partnership has gone on for about 4 or 5 years thus far. And what it looks like is a dual focus on education. So we have IC members teaching courses. So people from the NGA come to Gallaudet University and teach classes to our undergraduate students. In 2 fields. One is human-computer interaction, and they've also been teaching geospatial intelligence systems, or GIS. That way, we've built programs in the fall or spring to teach basic and more advanced courses. And we're excited to see that happen. We have experts from the government come and teach at Gallaudet University, but also we plan to build a symposium that will happen at Gallaudet. This is a yearly symposium that will happen in the fall in order to showcase and highlight the partnership between Gallaudet University and NGA. And we expect to involve undergraduate students in class projects, as well as capstone projects. We also have a new graduate program that focuses on accessible computing. And we're very excited to see what kind of research projects we can collaborate with the NGA on in that field. And it's still a work in progress. We also are working on our certificate program with USGIF. That is also a work in progress that I'm very much looking forward to concluding soon. I would like to step back a little bit and take a look at the bigger picture. I was happy to see you mention diversity, inclusion, and accessibility, because I think along the same lines as accessibility as part of diversity and inclusion. At Gallaudet University, we are a bilingual university serving deaf and hard of hearing individuals in Washington, D.C. And a lot of our undergraduate students are deaf or hard of hearing. And recently, Gallaudet University has been bringing on more and more non-traditional students from diverse backgrounds who have different educational pathways. Also, increasing our enrollment of individuals of color. More than 50% of incoming students are students of color. And so Gallaudet is very excited to face our changing world and become more diverse. And so how does the intelligence community benefit from that partnership with Gallaudet University? I want to emphasize one shocking statistic, but also very similar to what you said. You look at the individuals who participate in the workforce, about 41% of deaf and hard of hearing people are not part of the workforce in the United States at all. That is more than double the percentage of the hearing population. If the intelligence community could leverage those individuals to participate in the workforce, how amazing could that be? And they would also reap the benefit. So overall, Gallaudet University and the NGA's partnership is a huge opportunity for a win-win, both for the intelligence community to improve access to a talented workforce, as well as for Gallaudet University to be able to create new opportunities for our students and improve the outcomes with student graduation to career pipeline and student retention.
Thank you so much for that. That was also incredible. All these stats are very eye-opening, I know for myself, I'm sure for a number of you in the audience as well. Peter, I wanted to ask you about your company and how you have built it to demonstrate the necessity for the IC to leverage neurodiversity.
Sure. Oh, perfect. This works great. I'm feeling a little bit like Admiral Stockdale, though. I'm asking myself, why am I here and who am I? And I do want to give a shout out to Gina. Gina, that was amazing. I will never follow you at any other conference ever again. That was fantastic. The story of Enabled Intelligence, we're just under 2 years old, and we hire primarily people, neurodiverse professionals, to do intelligence analysis and create artificial intelligence tools for the government. And it started, I don't have a background, I don't have a story of a child or a parent or a loved one who's neurodiverse or a person with disabilities. I saw an economic opportunity and also strongly believe from my background as a policy analyst and an economist of finding rents and underserved populations to leverage strength. And what I mean by that is when I used to write analysis reports for the US government on how do we take on great country competition, what was our biggest leverage point? And World War I, before that, it was our population strength versus our competitors. World War II was our industrial strength. We beat the Soviets by outspending them. We can do none of that to the Chinese. But what we have always done better at is leveraging our diversity of our people, granted not perfectly from the beginning and hopefully becoming more perfect over time. But that diversity of perspective, diversity of thought, is our greatest strength as a country. And we don't leverage that as much as we can. And I thought, well, I don't believe that Xi or Putin are sitting there trying to figure out how do I bring diversity of thought to my intelligence analysis. Centrally controlled economies and centrally controlled governments are based on a central thought. Ours is based on diversity of thought, hopefully, and more so. Anyway, in extrapolating that to this position, what I saw both in my time in the research community at SRI International, running a previous intelligence AI company, and in my time in the government, was there's this huge issue of the government, US government and the IC and DoD create more data than anyone else in the world right now still. Just barely, but still. But we can't access 99.9% of it because we can take lots and lots of pictures of the Earth and we can only have so many eyeballs. We can listen to lots of signals. We can capture a lot of signals. We can only listen and hear a little bit of it. AI proves to be a major potential benefit to solving that problem. How do we go through all of that noise and find the cool stuff? But AI is all based, what the dirty little secret about AI is it starts with human intelligence. Right? If we're going to teach a machine to learn how to do something, someone has to teach it. And the way that's done is at a rudimentary level. If I want to teach a machine to find pictures of cats on the internet, I have to take a whole bunch of pictures of cats, put a box around it. A person, puts a box around it, say, this is a cat computer, this is not a cat computer. Give it thousands of those, and eventually it learns what a cat looks like, hopefully. Extrapolate that to MiG-29s versus MiG-31s, extrapolate that to Syrian Arabic saying bad things versus saying good things, text, social media intention, and all the kind of stuff that we're trying to do. Lots of Silicon Valley, lots of Boston, Austin, working on how do I be machine learning and GPUs at the edge and computers at the edge, and ignoring this very basic fundamental piece, which is how do I make the data even ingestible to a computer? That work is highly technical, repetitive, puzzle solving, detail oriented. So as I was looking for a population in the US that could carry clearances, would be US citizens and would carry this mission, who is underemployed, who is technical, detail oriented, puzzle solving, focused on repetitive activity, and can think about data differently than anyone else. The neurodiverse population. I wish I came up with that idea myself, but I learned it from the Israelis. The Israelis, similar to everyone in Israel, or almost everyone in Israel, does 2 years of public service, military service. They have a neurodiverse population, just like anywhere else. And they started deploying their neurodiverse enrollees into cybersecurity divisions, into Battalion 8200, because they could do cybersecurity code analysis. They would go through lines and lines and lines of code or incursions and find these patterns, these details, and these technical approaches. And I'm like, well, that sounds a lot like data labeling and annotation. It's technical, it's repetitive, it's problem solving, it's puzzle solving, and so built that population here. So in the last 18 months, we've hired over 25 neurodiverse professionals. We pair them with their full-time employees, W-2s, full benefits, all the like. We pair them with military veterans, military spouses for technical expertise, mission orientation, things like that. And we do stuff like analyzing SAR imagery for finding bad guys in obfuscated environments. We've listened to foreign language on signals intelligence. We've done hyperspectral data, text analytics, RF. None of the folks that we hired who are neurodiverse came from that background. But they did have some computer skills. We have people straight out of high school. We have people who were pushing a mop for Melwood, had a clearance because they were pushing a mop at Langley, and now they're doing computer programming and designing AI because they could do that. They did it. So I just make money off of it, so good for me. The point there being is that diversity, understanding that's not a DEI initiative. That's not, we wanted 10% of the people there because we're trying to meet a subcontracting goal. We're trying to show, hey, I want to be able to stand at this panel and be a white guy who can talk about diversity. It's because it's just damn better. So to give an example, we did a project for Gina's former agency, CIA, I can say it, it's an SC0. Woo. I even know what SC0 means now. They had taken 5 years to look at some of this data to build a rudimentary model. We built 15 models in 5 months, and we did it at 1/10 the cost. That's not because there's some incredible technology that we had. Our people could find this stuff faster and do it faster. It's just the nature. It's neurodiverse. It's not neurodisabled. It's a different way of thinking. Now, in addition to that, we've expanded that platform. So we have folks who are deaf who are doing image analysis. We have folks who are blind who are doing audio and RF. Why? They're better at it. Their hearing is better, they're visually better, they're just better at it. And so we're kicking people's butt. And hopefully we're kicking the Chinese butt and the Russian butt, because that's what I certainly care about. But it's because of that diversity. Now, we've had to do a whole lot of things. How do you get security clearances? What sort of accommodations? But I think of accommodations as like, hey, if we hired a data scientist, which we do, we buy them a big computer with lots of GPUs in it, because that's what helps them do their job better. So those accommodate what helps them do their job better. So anyway, that's our little bit of story.
Great. Thank you so much for that. So I see that we're collecting some questions around the room, which is great. But before they hand them to me, I know that I have one from my list that I definitely want to ask this panel. And I'm sure that a number of us work at organizations that are thinking about this and admittedly are a little bit challenged in how to do this. So my question to you all is, how are you all measuring success when it comes to justice, equity, diversity, inclusion? Are there measures that you guys have in place, or have you started thinking about that? I know my organization, we're struggling with that a little bit. It's very tough to measure. So would love to hear what you all think about that.
It's an excellent question, and we often say in cybersecurity, you can't improve what you can't measure. And metrics and quantitative elements are often very difficult in this. There is a strategy. So CISA is part of the Department of Homeland Security. The Department of Homeland Security has a diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility strategy with metrics. We're taking that as a baseline, but what we're really looking to do is how are we making sure that our agency is representing the nation? And so it's not just about reaching a statistic, reaching a percentage, but we're truly looking at how are we going to bring in all of these elements to make what we're doing better. And so to, I think, Peter's excellent point, it's not, again, just about the trophy for participation of, oh, look, we've got these numbers. It's we're showing that by doing this, we are doing better, and how the engagement of these individuals is making our work better, is making the products better. And so there is a metric there, but there are also qualitative metrics about that type of effort and the outcomes, which I think, to your point, Nicole, is so critical in this space because, I think Peter said it so effectively, which is it's because when you do that, your work is better because these individuals have better experience, expertise. Again, going to the cyber element, we will create the best and most innovative solutions if we're truly pulling from diverse backgrounds. It's not just about gender and race, but it's about socioeconomic background, experience, upbringing, cultural, and all of those elements. So we're really looking at creating those qualitative as well as quantitative metrics.
Dr. Vogler, or any thoughts on that?
Sure. So from Gallaudet University's perspective, the most important piece to measure is student success. So what that means, overall, how a student is performing. And making sure that students perform equitable across the spectrum of diversity and outcomes related to graduation, retention are equitable, but also successful job placement. So Gallaudet University now is working on a new plan to measure success internally on diversity, equity, and inclusion. We have an Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion that are driving that mission in partnership with a student success. And that's not finalized, so I can't comment right now on the details of the metrics yet, because it's something we're still working on.
We will invite you back next year to report out. That's great. I'm going to pivot to some of the questions we got from the audience. And as an aside, whoever's penmanship this is, I'd like to hire you to work with my 15-year-old this summer because it's impeccable. So question number one, which I will throw to Peter. Programs and partnerships focused on recruiting diverse talent are a great starting point. But what initiatives are you implementing to retain that talent and make sure that they feel a sense of belonging, not just included and equitable?
Great question. Yeah, as I said, I didn't have a background in this community. Lauren Dagan-Smith, who's our Chief People Officer, who would have been sitting here today, but she has a new baby and a beach vacation, and so she got to do that, and I get to spend it with you. But we didn't know. So I heard Lauren, she used to lead hiring of and support for veterans at Hilton Hotels, and we brought her in, like, how do we build this program up? And our first thought was there was going to be a lot of turnover. And we have not. We have had one employee leave because NGA hired them, which is great. But we've only had one employee leave. We had to look sort of ground up. First we started asking, this question I said about, or this point I made about accessibility or accommodations, and started asking those. And how do you ask that in an appropriate way? How do you help someone through the clearance process who's exceptionally honest, if you will, but just detailed honest. I'll give a little story here. We had a person, they're going through their process, and they got to a question. They came and asked, Pete, I have a question for you. I don't know how to answer this. And it was the have you ever used illegal drugs question. I'm like, oh boy, here we go. I'm like, okay, well, you just tell honestly, and I said, what's your worry? Have you used illegal drugs? Well, not that I know of, but I know I read somewhere that on $20 bills that, every $20 bill has a certain percentage of cocaine still left on it, and I have handled a $20 bill, and I think I may have put it in my mouth like 5 years ago. I don't really know. But I'm like, you know what? Actually, go ahead and say all of that in the interview. I would love to see what would happen. But the point is we reversed how we think about supporting our folks. Number one is it starts with the recruiting and interviewing process. Typically, when you do an interview, when I've ever done them or been part of them, been interviewed for a job, you go in, you give a resume, you turn in your cover letter, you meet for the person, and you do that first. Oh, is this person who's someone who could feel like they could work here? Did they lean forward? Did they research our company or research our agency ahead of time? And then you get into the meat of can they do the job or whatever. We flip that. So we have an online test. We do it in audio. We do it visually. We do it in writing, whatever works best for them. And they sample doing the type of work that we do. If they pass that all of our next things are about how do we get that person in. We know they can do the work. What do we have to do to be able to get them into our company? And it comes from that perspective. We do things now that I hadn't even thought of before, but we have Wellness Wednesdays. We've partnered with local nonprofits, Our Stomping Ground, Social Grace, and others to provide a sense of community for this group. They haven't typically had many, honestly, friends or social outlets. And they have movie nights, they have date nights, they are participating in book clubs and reading groups and stuff that we don't actually, we just pointed, we found the resources pointed. And that sense of community, that belonging, that's what kept them. They're worried that it's not been how much we pay, thankfully. But I mean, we pay well, but it's been that they feel they're in a community. And it's a competitive, integrated community. We have, not everyone, it's about 50%, 52% of our folks are neurodiverse or persons with disabilities. The rest are just normal yutzes like us, so like me. So that integrated involvement and that sense that whatever it is that, however you are, it fits here, that has been better for us for retention and employee happiness than anything else.
I think that's a lesson for all of us in this kind of climate we're in with retaining folks, is building that culture and making sure people feel included. I think that's great. Dr. Vogler, I have a question for you. What is the most impactful action or accommodation you have experienced as a deaf, hard of hearing individual? How can we make your life better / easier in a work setting?
So let me ask for a quick point of clarification. You mentioned the most impactful action. And could that include adoption of new technologies? Okay. So if so, I think the easy answer is adaptive communication through the internet. Because really making sure that communication is equitable. No matter if you're deaf, hard of hearing, or hearing, it's about the equal opportunity to participate and equally communicate through a person's preferred mode of communication. So if it's through video relay, have that. If it's through audio, have that. If for captions or text, have that. So be willing to change how people in the workspace interact with one another. All of that. And I also wanted to mention one interesting challenge that sometimes is a conflict between new technologies and security. If you're working in a space that requires security, confidentiality, the open question is, how does a new technology improve the lives of our people? And can that new technology be integrated into that secure space?
Okay, so I got the 10-minute warning, and I've gotten lots of questions, which is great. I'm glad everyone's so engaged. So we're going to do a little bit of a lightning round, I think, for the remaining 8. Emma's going to keep me honest on this. All right, so I'm going to start with Kiersten. This is a pretty hard one, but I think you can do it. How can we change the culture of the U.S. government toward a more diverse and inclusive way?
I'll get at world peace while I'm at it. I think it was said a little bit earlier, which is that this starts from culture. And when we think about a lot of what the government's mission is, we think very much about the technical piece, the secure piece. Certainly in cybersecurity, we tend to lead with technology. But it really, people are the foundation of what we do. And what we have to improve upon in government is creating cultures that support. And again, it's not just about the support being the destination, but support in a way that then acknowledges and honors that if we are going to achieve, if we're going to be innovative, if we are going to be the best nation and in service that we can be, we have to elevate these elements and ensure that our workforce in the government, but everywhere, represents our nation. And the more we can get out the data about how this is helping our outcomes, and it's very much about challenging people. But to answer more simply, just I'll make it more lightning round, is just this is about creating those cultures. And in the government, we're starting to see more of that, but we have a long way to go.
Great job. Okay, I have a question for Dr. Vogler. Do you want me to hand you the mic? Got it. Okay. Dr. Vogler, are there other government agencies beyond NGA and the private sector who engage with Gallaudet? Is the Fall Symposium an opportunity to highlight these? It's the Fall Symposium, right? Oh, your symposium in the fall.
So the answer is, for Gallaudet University, I mean, we work with the NGA, with INSA, GDIT. I think those are within the intelligence community, and I'm not sure if other government agencies are part of that. But we are continuing to negotiate relationships with those 3 agencies involved. And I can go back and ask to see if there's a plan to involve other agencies as well in that symposium.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question, and I'll throw it to Peter. Are the challenges to promoting accessibility in the IC principally due to inadequate policies, resources, or technology, or simply a lack of understanding about how organizations can draw on folks with disabilities?
I don't know. I guess I would go more with the second. I started my career in government, and there's sort of a get out of jail free clause in every government contract and government agency, which is you have to follow all these rules, you have to do all this thing in the FAR and the DFARs and all, except in the cases of national security, or if the secretary signs off, or someone signs off, which basically means you can do whatever the heck you want as long as you have one of those. So this thing like I can't do it or not do it. So I don't think there's policies or procedures or technologies. There's certainly things there that hold people back, or we can use as a crutch or as a break. I mean, there's things that we've learned about the security clearance process, or how do you get in a SCIF, or stuff like that. But all of that is addressable. I think the biggest issue is, for me, still DEI is seen as something that's a participation trophy. It's a percentage you're supposed to hit. And there's only a few people who have the faith and belief that it will actually do better to be diverse. It's one of the reasons why I love what Gina said this morning, the diversity of thought and perspective that she was trying to bring. Please keep pounding on that table. Just to the concept of security versus safety, that diversity of thought is making us stronger. And there's a few, Tanya has a large program at NGA where they're bringing this in, and you can see that diversity. But there's still too much where it's like, oh, well, we'll carve out this percentage, or we'll do this, or we'll find this little niche. And that's from a lack of faith, not from a lack of policy or technology. I don't necessarily, people just don't maybe believe that diversity will do better, or it's scary. And you do have to just step off that ledge. And one of the nice things about the government and government position is the missions for these agencies are so important that you kind of have to take those risks. If we're going to put someone with a gun into a foreign country and put their lives in danger, how hard is it to change how you're going to do a contract at home for an IT contract or this? The level of risk is so much less, yet we can be so much more effective. But that stepping over, it's that perspective or that faith that I think is missing sometimes.
Well, I think we'll leave it there. I just want to thank so much the panelists this morning for sharing your creative and innovative ideas. I think to pull through the theme that Gina talked about this morning with the cookies, I think we all appreciate that you guys aren't shoving the chocolate chips into this problem of the cookie. You're really trying to start from scratch and figure out how to build it forward. So thank you for sharing your ingenuity. Thank you for being here, and thank you, INSA, for having us.
Thank you, Nicole, for leading the conversation. If you all just have a seat for just a second. Hang on, Herman, just a moment. So I just wanted to say that I think our panelists will be around for a portion of today. I know Nicole had a lot of other questions to get to, so I hope during the networking breaks you all will introduce yourselves and ask your questions. Next up, we have a refreshment break for about 15 minutes that LMI has sponsored. To the left is our putting competition, and all proceeds raised go towards the INSA scholarship funds. I have my credit card. I'm traveling rapidly throughout the summer, building up my frequent flyer miles, so I will be entering the $50 putting competition. I have never really held a golf club, but I do move my husband's around the garage from place to place sometimes, so I hope that qualifies. And I want you all to enjoy, network, and be back here at 11 for our series of Ignite rounds. Thanks so much.